encourage your soul, enlighten your mind, and empower your faith. This is the Light Network. Hello and welcome to Preachers in Training. This is the podcast on which we discuss all things preaching and ministry. I'm Robert Hatfield. I want to welcome you into yet another episode coming to you from the exhibit hall floor at Polishing the Pulpit in Sevierville, Tennessee. And I'm happy to get to sit down next to David Sproule today, who is one of the ministers for the Palm Beach Lakes Church of Christ in West Palm Beach, Florida.
You got it right.
Did I get it right?
You got it right.
Welcome back.
It's great to be back.
We often sit down together during PTP, and thanks for carving out some PTP time for us.
Oh, it's fun.
Yeah.
Always fun sitting down with
great.
you and just talk and see what we can come up with and
See where it goes.
Seeing your family. That's always fun.
Yeah, they're the stars of the show, right?
Oh, of course.
Absolutely.
Of course.
How are your grandkids?
Grandchild? Singular, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
okay.
So far.
How's your grandchild doing?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. He's
Good.
great.
Okay.
Great. 6 months old.
I was going to say,
Yep.
my wires got crossed there a minute, but I remember. Yep. Okay,
Yep.
good.
All is well.
Good.
Family's well, and I saw yours last night. I was going to come up and talk to Owen last night, but they got started. I was like, well, I better keep my seat.
He would have kept you talking, too.
Oh, yeah.
He gets it honest. Anyway. PTP is a fun time just to get together with everybody, and we're excited today to talk about a listener-requested topic, and the listener said, talk about tenure, so we've titled this On Tenure.
Great.
When we talk about tenure in preaching circles, it may mean something different than in different, shall we say, professions, careers. That's not my favorite way to refer to what we do, but anyway, It is what it is.
Yeah.
We're just talking about staying. Stick-to-itiveness.
Yes.
That's what I've heard somebody say before.
Yeah, definitely not the what they would think of in the corporate world or even in the education world,
right.
Getting tenure at university or something. But just the idea of staying at a congregation for a long period of time, and which is a good thing. I think there's definitely benefits to that, and hopefully more of us are staying longer at places than shorter periods of time. But always something we ought to shoot for.
Recent survey I saw from the Jenkins Institute. Did you see that too?
I did.
They were doing this. What's on average? How long have you been where you are, and how long were you at your last work? And then anyway, they had several hundred people, ministers, I guess, take the survey, and the results I saw were like 8 years was the average.
Longer than I guess I would have guessed.
Yeah.
I probably would have put it more in the 3 or 4. My guess would have been 3 or 4 years on average. So that was encouraging.
Yeah.
That it was a higher number than I expected.
I used to hear when I was younger, you really don't know the people and have built up enough trust until like year 7 is what I used to hear. And I was like, wow, okay, well by then you're out the back door.
Right.
Year 8's coming,
Well, there was a joke about some preachers that I used to hear that they changed every 3 years because they only had 3 years of sermons.
They ran out of sermons.
So they had to start over again. So whether there was any truth to that, who knows?
Yeah.
But
I'm assuming the majority of fellows who are listening to this, however long their, shall we say, tenure has been where they were or where they are now, it probably wasn't because they were in that camp, right? That they ran out of sermons and they don't want to have to study anymore. There were probably some circumstances that led to whatever happened.
Yes.
Whether they chose the move or someone else chose it for them. My hunch is most of us preachers like to think that we're in it for the long haul when we start a work in a new congregation.
So.
Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I hope so. But you're right. I mean, there's more factors involved than just the preacher.
Yeah.
If the preacher had his way, then hopefully he would, come with a mindset to stay. But he's not the only one that gets to make that decision.
Yeah, sure.
So,
and that's an eldership's right.
It is.
I mean, if they don't feel it's effective or any longer effective or whatever.
Yes.
We like to. I mean, there's not an elders in training podcast, but we would like to think that perhaps some elders would.
I wonder if somebody could come up with something like that, an elders in training podcast. If only there was somebody who could put that together.
I don't know who we get to host it.
But no, I mean, there's, you talk about preachers, and, hopefully preachers have that mindset, okay, I want to go and I want to stay.
Yeah.
And, but it's not always on him. It's, we've got a lot of palm trees down in South Florida,
yes.
But for some reason I don't see a whole lot of palm trees up here. I mean, why is that? Do y'all not like palm trees?
Yeah.
But it's the environment, is different, and so you gotta go where you can fit, where you can stay and make the most difference. Mm-hmm. I even when you sent me this topic last week or something, I started having some thoughts, and I was like, wait a minute, it's not just the preachers view on this. So I asked my elders, I'm like, all right, so from your perspective, what would it take?
Like, where is this coming from?
I gave them a little heads up because otherwise they'd be like, what's David thinking?
Yeah, what's he doing? About to go off to polishing the pulpit, and you're asking questions like this,
So I wanted their view on it, because the congregation there has been one that preachers have stayed there for a long while. Most of them have been there.
Way above the Jenkins Institute average.
Way above. Yes, way above. So that probably brought the average up.
Yeah. So how long has Dan Jenkins been there?
Dan's been there since 1982.
Okay.
So he's
42
and a half years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then how long have you been there?
Longer than Dan, if I get to just say how long have I been there, because I was born and raised there,
right.
So my parents were members there, so longer than Dan, but it started working 94 part time, and then full time in 97.
Okay, all right.
So take whatever number you want, but
yeah,
but a while,
yeah,
a while.
See, that's fantastic. One of the questions that I've asked elderships in the past when we've been talking, I asked it to Henderson. I said, when you start a journey with a new preacher, do you begin with an end in mind? And they said, no, we don't begin with an end in mind. And part of it, from there, frankly, they were like, listen, we don't want to do this any more than we have to.
That's true.
The whole hiring, finding the guy, interviewing the guy, bringing him in and all that, it's just too much trouble.
Oh, that's tough. That is a hard process to go through. So, yeah.
For everybody
everybody.
Yeah.
Fewer times that everybody has to do that.
Right.
The better.
The better.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So, it's good to stay at a place as long as you can. Do you think that there's a number, like, once you get past this number, you can really start digging in and doing something good? I mean, I know we talk about the honeymoon.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Is there? Do you agree with the whole after 7 years, that's really when you feel like you've turned a corner? Or I've heard now 5 is the number I'm hearing these days. But
yeah, I've heard different numbers. It
kind of partially depends on the guy and the congregation.
It very much depends on all of that. And in some of this, it's a little hard for me to put myself into that question.
Okay.
Because I haven't been on how long does it.
Because you grew up at that congregation.
I grew up.
You didn't have to learn the names.
Graduated college and moved back there the same day. And
okay. Yeah.
So it's. I have not had to have that experience of how long does it take to really feel like you fit in. Mm-hmm. But no, I could see it taking a while because, you come in as an outsider, and certainly there's a lot of people to learn, names to learn, relationships to learn, and all of that. Yeah. But they also have to learn you too. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, there would be a little bit of a gap there that remains, it keeps getting narrower and narrower, I would think, over time. But it's, do we know this guy? Is this guy going to stay, or is he going to be like the last guy who bailed out on, and so there's comparisons and all sorts of things.
And isn't that funny too, that we're both thinking the same thing? I've heard before, like, I literally have heard this about new ministries. Don't trust the first few people who befriend you, because they're usually the first ones who stab you in the back. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, that's terrible.
It is.
And then the congregation's thinking the same thing. Was he going to be like the last guy?
Right.
Is he just going to up and leave after 3 years? And
right.
whatever. I mean, so we're all kind of leery of each other at first.
So there's the building of the trust both directions, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So, and fortunately, brothers and sisters in Christ, you know, that's a process that we can go through a little quicker, hopefully. And at least that's the way it should be, I would think.
Yeah. What do you think? You mentioned at the top, you know, you do think that there are great blessings in staying a while. You want to maybe delineate or discuss some of those, or should we go to Scripture first and lay some foundation work first? What do you want to do?
Either way.
Okay.
You know, I think, you know, when you say delineate the blessings, the benefits, you know, I think you would look at it from, you know, what are the blessings, benefits for the preacher himself or for his family, or in my mind, what's more important is the congregation.
Right.
You know, from the congregation's perspective, you know, what are the blessings? What are the benefits of that? And I guess, you know, those would be multifold, but, you know, I would see just the consistency of having someone there, that building those relationships, that you know the man who's in the pulpit because he's been in your home, you know, or he's been there at the hospital with you, or whatever it may be. And the longer you can be there to build those relationships outside the pulpit, you know, the more effective you can be in the pulpit.
I think about Ben Flatt in Henderson.
Yes.
And Brother Flatt preached at the Henderson congregation for like 18 years.
Right.
He can tell you exactly how many sermons he preached from that pulpit. I mean, he's got the numbers at the top of his head. But, of course, he still is ministering, though not, you know, quote unquote officially as part of the Henderson congregation. But boy, when it's funerals or things like that, Brother Flatt's called on, and he's lived with those people for decades.
Yes.
And he knows them so well. And I think about, boy, a long-term ministry.
Right.
I mean, I think about him.
Well, because you become a part of the family.
Yes.
It's not, well, he's the preacher, he's the minister, he's one of us.
Right.
And so at those times of trials in life, well, he's there. And it becomes, he's there not because that's his job, but because, well, he's part of our family.
Turns out he really cares about us.
Turns out. Wow. Go figure.
I like that.
But, you know, I think those benefits are both direct. You know, as a minister, we would think, you know, what's in it for me? You know, what are the benefits for me?
Sure.
And certainly they're there. Are there benefits for the family? Certainly, especially if you've got kids. You know, the longer you can stay in one place, you know, the benefits that is for just the kids to have some stability there.
Your daughters were in the same school system their whole lives.
Their whole lives. My daughter's same school system, same congregation.
How cool.
It was.
Youth group stability, everything.
Same everything. I mean, they grew up calling, you know, members of our congregation, grandma and grandpa, aunt this, uncle that. Yeah. And still to this day, they're in their 20s, but they still refer to those people at the congregation as aunt so-and-so, uncle so-and-so, because it's just part of the family.
That's the way it ought to be.
Yeah. It should. Yeah, and really any place you go, you know, however long you're there or however short you're there, just building those bonds. And you've got those relationships, you know, from where you have been.
Yes.
That you've still got a closeness with certain people, you know, more than you have with other people. But that's natural. Even if you're, you know, I've grown up in the congregation. There's people I'm closer to than other people.
Sure.
And that's just natural. Right. I mean, that's even in biological family. There's people in my biological family you're closer to than others.
Yeah.
So
no offense to those people if they're
no,
listening.
of course not. They know who they are.
How does an extended tenure challenge you as a preacher? What are I mean, you can't get lazy in your Bible study if you're doing something like that.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
You feel like you always need to be fresh in your study, but continuing to dig all of the time so that you have something new to offer, not outside of Scripture, obviously, but that you're not preaching the same sermons, the same points, using the same illustrations.
Yeah.
And so
is that hard? It's like, you know, because sometimes you hear preachers say, I know I've told this here before, but
right, it is, and it can be, but you know but that's the beauty of the Bible is you never get to the end of it.
Yeah.
You never find the bottom. You never find the bottom of it.
Right.
So you just keep digging, and you continue to find things that can be, you know, new insights, but really they're old insights. Just another way of saying the same thing.
How about your style? I mean, do you have to vary your style any? Do you do you get the sense the congregation can predict sort of how you're going to approach a topic based on the way you?
Probably sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
You know, I think you try to come up with a new way to deal with that so that it's not totally predictable, or that it becomes, you know, just mundane or the same thing every time. So, you know, but ultimately you're still teaching and preaching the same thing, and you know, I don't think we can totally reinvent ourselves in a whole new style. We are who we are, and even watching guys here at PTP, you know, that I've heard for years, they're preaching the same way they did 20 years. I mean, slight variations, but that's why you love them.
You still like to hear it. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I know what I can expect from this man.
Yes.
I'm going to go hear him.
Yes, exactly.
That's good.
Yeah.
How about cycles in the life of the congregation? Are there things that you see come up regularly? Are there themes that, you know, you it just sort of seems like every 5 years it seems like I need to address this. Some of those are probably built in. I mean, I think we're in an election season right now.
True.
So obviously every 4 years-ish,
right? Maybe
more frequently, maybe less frequently, depending on where you are. But there are themes that we're hitting on. I've seen a lot of guys preaching about the kingdom these days, and Christ's his reign and all of that.
Right.
But are there things just in the life of the church that you see?
Yeah, I mean, you've got good questions, Robert. I mean, to make me
off the top of my head. I'm sorry. I'm just
no. These are
I'm
good.
Not asking for myself.
These are good. No, I mean, but yes, I mean, naturally there would be, and part of that is, you know, one, you have new folks coming in. It's, I mean, if you were preaching to the same people every week for 10 years, okay, that's one thing. But you're not. Yeah. You're preaching and teaching and ministering to different people, you know, and folks who are, you know, new converts, folks who are being baptized on a regular basis. You know, they need the same thing that new converts got last year and the year before and the year before. Yeah. And so, you know, and that's, so there's a continual, you know, whether it's a cycle or you know, but there's always, you're wanting to feed the new converts, but you're also feeding those who are the seasoned members as well. Yeah. And so, I think there's a regular cycle to make sure that, you know, that those old truths are still brought out, but those foundations continue to be laid for the new folks.
Just continue to keep a finger on the pulse, then, it sounds like, of what's going on in the life of the church, and respond to the needs. Is it hard to, is there a temptation to compare the past to the present?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes in a discouraging way or sometimes in an encouraging way, but
I think that's probably natural for all of us, whatever the situation. You know, you get in relationships, and well, does she like me as much as she liked the last guy? You know, she was dating, and the comparison's always there. And so, you know, I think for any preacher to look back and say, okay, well, you know, the congregation was thriving at this point in the past. Well, what was going on at that point?
Yeah.
And what can we learn from that and duplicate from that? But also recognizing that was also a different time.
Yeah.
Different things were happening in people's lives, and you know, so looking at the past, learning from it, but you can't always go back and duplicate the good stuff.
Right. Yeah. Okay. There's so many things that I remember when we got to Charleston. There was this mass exodus, and there were like 70 people were gone in the first year and a half. And the elders called me in and they said, "Robert, it's not you. We just want you to know." They said, Charleston is changing, and jobs are changing, and people are having to move out of the city.
Wow.
And they said, you know, sometimes they're being transferred, and we had a very large military presence there in Charleston, of course, and so, you know, people are being transferred, and they said every person who has met with us that told us they had to leave, none of them wanted to leave. They just had to leave.
Wow.
On paper, you show up and 70 people are gone, and it's like, well, what does that say about you as a minister? You know, what if you had to put that on your resume? Well, in my first year at Charleston, we lost 70 people. You know, it doesn't look so good. But you think there are so many factors that impact the number of people that may be in those pews on any given Sunday.
That's true. And what a good job for the elders to do that.
Oh,
for
yeah,
you.
they were great.
What a great thing for them to do. You know, we did a study, just kind of a look at our numbers, and this was probably 10 years ago that we did it. But we looked back over a period of 30 years at our membership and looked at a couple different of the number systems that were there. But we found that over that 30-year period, that we had lost on average 58 members every year.
Wow.
Whether that was death or moving away
Sure.
or falling away, whatever it may be. But and that, my guess would be that's got to be true for a lot of congregations.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, so if you're losing an average of 58 members every year, well, that in and of itself says, okay, there's a refreshing that's going on here on a regular basis, and we're kind of transient down there where people are moving in and moving out. Of course, you got the foundation of folks who are always there, but a lot of folks in and out. Which again, you evaluate, like you say, put your finger on the pulse of what's going on with the membership.
Yeah. How about I've often thought every time there's a change in the eldership, one man resigns or one man is added to it,
right,
the whole group takes on a different complexion.
It does.
Even if you had 5 and you added a 6th, or you had 5 and you lost one down to 4, it still changes the entire complexion somehow, the whole group.
It does.
How do you navigate leadership changes for the long
very
haul?
Carefully.
Okay.
Who's watching this today?
I realize that these are very targeted because you've been there, and so
Right.
let's just say, none of these answers aren't necessarily reflective on of that, the Great Palm Beach Lakes congregation.
No, but it does change. I mean, in the eldership, it does change, and most people wouldn't think that. They say one man in, one man out. Is not that big of a deal.
They're all doing the same thing anyway.
But it needs to be.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if it was Jerry Barber, who it was, talked about. If you bring in a new elder, or one leaves, I think he talked about, you have a funeral for the eldership. And the idea that this is a new eldership. And but there's always the tendency of, we made this decision 20 years ago, we made this decision 30 years ago, and here's why, and this is still the decision today. Well, that may be, 20 years ago, currently we have 5 elders, and only one of them was probably an elder back then. So it's a brand new eldership compared to where we were 25 years ago.
Right.
And so that decision about, whatever the insignificant carpet color, or, where we put the partitions, or, those kind of things. So we're not talking doctrinal things. It's just those matters of judgment. It's like, okay, this was a decision before, but that, this is a different eldership that may view some things a little different. Or if that was made 30 years ago, this is a different congregation in many respects.
Different needs.
Yeah,
that's true.
And so how do you evaluate those? And and sometimes the membership doesn't always see that or understand that, but it's fun when a new elder comes in and he's learning the other elders, learning what it is to be an elder, and yet he becomes absorbed to become a part of that eldership, not as, we don't ever talk about junior elders or rookie elders. I mean, we might in play the terminology, but never in reality that, okay, he's very much, just as much one of the elders as anybody else.
Yes, And his contributions to the team, I guess is what we're saying, changes just the way that looks or feels now.
It does.
Yeah. Okay. All right. This last question I can think of, and then I'm going to be quiet. But I'm thinking about what characteristics do you have to stick it out when it is kind of tough? Maybe you can look back after 5 years and say, that eldership change 5 years ago worked out for the best, even though in the moment it was kind of rocky because people had a lot of questions or whatever, just hypothetical. But if you wouldn't have stuck it out, you wouldn't have gotten to the better part later, whatever that better part is.
Right.
Are there tips or characteristics or things that you want to offer to guys just to say, hey, stick with it as long as you can? And I'm not asking you to go down this road. This is a hard, how do you know when it's time to go? And we don't have to get into all that stuff. But for somebody who wants to enjoy these blessings of a long tenure at any one congregation, and the eldership is willing and you're willing, but sometimes you may be on the fence, and who isn't? That's why the Jenkins brothers say don't quit on a Monday or a Tuesday or anyway. We all have those low moments.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, I knew this.
Just be stubborn?
Well, certainly. I mean, you want to endure. You want to evaluate. Okay, are the things that we're going through, is this because of me? Is this something that I brought, or is this something that I can help the congregation through? Is it something that I can be a benefit and a blessing in the process, or am I going to be a thorn in the side or a roadblock in the way here? And so what's my role here, and making sure my role is one that's going to help it through whatever the situation is. But I don't know if you're jumping to this or not, but as I was thinking about this topic when you sent it to me, and I thought, okay, what are some things that a preacher needs? What are some qualities that he needs in order to stay in a place for an extended period of time? I thought personally, and then I thought, okay, I don't really want to talk about qualities that I think I have, because who knows if I've got them or not. But I thought about the Apostle Paul, and and obviously we use Paul as a role model in a lot of different ways. And I thought, okay, what qualities of Paul? But I thought, okay, here's Paul's ministry. Did he ever stay anywhere for a long time? Well, in our minds, no. He brought the Jenkins Institute average down, right? But his longest, if you want to use the word tenure, his longest tenure was in Ephesus. And we think, well, he was only there for 3 years. Well, yeah, but that's twice as long as he's in Corinth, and longer than he's in anywhere else. And so I went and just read Acts 20. Just looking at what did he say to the elders, and that part of it was, to me, that was it was helpful to me just to go and read that, because it refreshed some things about what it was between the preacher, the minister, and the elders. It was it's interesting. He bypassed Ephesus, on that trip in a hurry to get to Jerusalem, but he stopped in Miletus and called for the elders from Ephesus. So there's something there, some kind of bond that was created there. And I don't know. Surely he said more than what we have in Acts 20, but in Acts 20 and verse 17 and 18, it says they got there and he started talking, and then you get down to the end of the chapter. He finished. They hugged his neck. They wept. They prayed, and they helped him get to the ship. I don't know if the conversation was that shorter, but it says they got there. He talked, and then he left. But there's some qualities there, and that I would encourage guys to go and look at in Acts 20. That he says from the get-go in verse 18. You've known from the first day how I've lived among you. Jump into the work. Don't hold yourself back. Jump in and get involved. Live the Christian life in front of it. And so you read through that passage, and there's just a lot of good stuff in there that says here's some things a preacher needs to do and to be to stay with the work.
I think about the trust that you have to build, even with those elders. If they've brought you there, you've probably passed whatever doctrinal concerns that they rightfully would have had. You want to make sure we can trust that what you're going to say is true and biblical. But they don't really know you. They don't know your work ethic when you're new. To build trust with guys and to do it right there in the open, to where they don't feel like, what isn't it, Paul in Colossians 3, or maybe my wires are getting crossed, but essentially says, work the same way when the master is present.
Yes.
And also when he's not.
Yes. And
I think maybe we would do well as preachers to keep that in mind,
have
a good work ethic. And so Paul's, to me, I've always read that Acts 20, and where he starts, it's as though he's saying, hey, I've lived right out here in the open, and you know exactly what I'm about. And I know what you're about, and we can have this shared dialogue because of that.
Absolutely.
We have trust with each other.
It is. Yeah. And even at the end of that, when you get down to verse 32, 33 area, he talks about how he worked with his hands, and making the tents. And then he uses the word how I labored among you night and day. And the word labor there is talking about I worked to the point of exhaustion. And part of that's making the tents, surely. But that's not his focus. His focus on the church. I mean, he labored. He labored to the point of exhaustion in serving the church. And that's I think that's I think preachers need to look at that and say, my job, and I know the joke about preachers, they work, on Sundays and half a day on Wednesdays. But unfortunately, some preachers have given the reputation that goes along with that.
I mean, that joke came from somewhere.
It did. Every joke has a little truth in it.
That's right, yeah.
So, but, I mean, that you need to come in and, verse 17 and 18, start work, jump into work right away, and then work, and toil and be involved, and don't count your hours. I've known of some preachers that they're working up, and I'm up to 37, 38 hours so far. Let me back off for the rest of the week.
Right.
Well, that's not the way it works. At least in my world of ministry, that's not the mindset. I don't think that we need to have.
No, I've often thought sarcastically, well, that must be nice.
Yes,
but I don't even mean that.
Right.
You do what you got to do.
Yes.
You respond in the way that you need to.
Yeah.
I pulled this up here. Paul says, I've been serving the Lord with all humility and with tears and the trials that happened to me through the plot of the Jews, verse 19. So you know what I've been through, and even those trials and his faithfulness under them helped to build that further rapport.
It did.
And I think it's good for elders to know, like, hey, I think I'm on the same team as you. I don't have the role in the team that you have.
Right.
And I tell my elders, I'm not an elder and I don't want to be one.
Yes.
I know it's good, whoever desires the office of a bishop. I just mean I'm not one of these preachers who's trying to take over your job.
Yes.
But to say, whatever I can do to be a part of the team and to help you do what you do.
Yes.
I think that's where my role is.
Yes.
I remember as a young preacher, I used to struggle with that. I'd read 1st, 2nd Timothy, and Titus and be like, okay, what? I get deacons and I get elders. And it's kind of like preachers are just like, just do everything else, whatever else it takes. Right. But I really think more and more, and I think Acts 20 is kind of what brought me there. Preacher, lift up the elders and help them out.
I think that's one of our number one jobs is because too many guys, and obviously it's in the denominational world, but too many preachers make it about themselves. Yeah. They don't call themselves the pastor, but they act like and think they're kind of the pastor running the show, and that is so far from biblical truth. And so our job is, okay, here's our shepherds, here's our overseers, and the preacher is the one who's generally in front of the congregation more than the elders are. And so our responsibility is to hold our elders up, to honor them. If 1 Timothy chapter 5 says, that here's one who's ruled well, he's worthy of double honor. Well, what does that mean about every one of them?
Yeah.
And so my responsibility is to honor them, hold them up, esteem, and I think you're right about Acts 20. You see a bond between Paul and these elders that maybe that's why he didn't want to stop in Ephesus, because he thought, I'll never get out of there, with this. I need it temporary.
We'll be there forever. Yeah.
He stops talking, and it says they fall down on him and they hug his neck and weep. But the thing that stuck with them was because he said that they would see his face no more. Well, that's back up halfway into what he said. He said a lot after that. Yeah. He even talked about the savage wolves and everything after that. Yeah. But what stuck in their head was, we're not going to see his face anymore. Well, what does that say? They had a bond. They had a relation. And where did that come? Maybe it came from playing dominoes on Friday night, but I think it was more the fact that here was a man who loved elders and wanted to support them, to help them in their work, because that's not easy. And preachers can do a lot to help the work of elders, as Hebrews 13:17 says. Let's help it be a work of joy and not of grief, and we can help them in that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that relationship, first of all, to our point, they were sad because they weren't going to see him anymore. In other words, is it too much of a leap? They didn't want him to leave, so this is a good principle for tenure.
There you go.
Now, I'm thinking about the guys who are listening to this, and they're maybe saying at their podcast app or phone or whatever, like, yeah, that's all well and good when you got good elders or when you have elders at all.
Right.
But this also is giving us the goal, right? This is maybe I am, for all intents and purposes, having to function as the chief executive officer of the congregation, okay?
Sure.
But and maybe I resent that, and don't resent it, but at least realize that's coming from a good place, because that's not the biblical model, right? But this is what you're working toward. And if you help a church to develop the scriptural organization, they're going to love you for that too, and probably those elders will. And there you go. You've got another great recipe for tenure, I would assume.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and I think that ties in with what you mentioned from Colossians 3 about, where it says, you're serving the Lord. Well, that's what Paul says in verse 19 here. Serving the Lord. I'm supporting my elders, and I'm under the elder. I'm not over the elders. I'm submitting to my elders. But ultimately, the beginning of verse 19 is you're serving the Lord. Yeah. And so keep that in mind. Whatever situation you are as a minister, whatever the congregation, however strong or weak the elder or non-existent the eldership is, ultimately you're serving the Lord. And so make that your focus. And I love the part right after that, with all humility. Yeah. Not some humility. I mean, he could have just said with humility, and it would have said the same thing. Right. But he puts the word all there. So, okay, guys, don't get the big head about who you are. You're not the Lord, so you're serving the Lord, and you need to serve him with all humility. And he talks about the sacrifices that he made in the work, and there's going to be sacrifices that we've got to make in our work. But just remembering, is it verse 24, where it talks about the ministry which I received from the Lord Jesus. It's not even my ministry. Yeah. The work that I'm doing here, I'm serving the Lord because it's his ministry. It's not mine. And so, when we struggle to in a congregation that's perhaps having some trials and difficulties, how long do I stay? Well, I'm serving the Lord. As long as I can serve the Lord in this place and fulfill. I don't think he uses the word fulfill here, but he does over in 2 Timothy 4, where he tells Timothy, fulfill your ministry. If I can serve the Lord and fulfill my ministry here, then I need to stick it out for the long haul if I can, not for my benefit, but for the cause of Christ.
Yeah. Paul definitely lived that. I've often thought he never lost sight of the gospel of Jesus, of the connection, and I guess that's got to be what got him through all that. I mean, shipwreck or standing on trial, or everybody forsook me, but the Lord stuck with me. I mean, all over and over and over. And now he can say that to them, not just conceptually because he knows that's the right answer. He's experiential knowledge. Taste and see kind of knowledge.
It is.
Right? Yeah.
It is. And you see his heart in that, And in 2 Corinthians 11, when he goes through all of the physical things that he had suffered, I mean, I just can't imagine, going through that many beatings, that many shipwrecks, that many lonely nights, that many times without food. Yeah. But the part, was it down in verse 28 of 2 Corinthians 11? What comes upon me daily, my deep concern for all the churches. And so he takes it to a different level. He says, all right, here's all this physical stuff that I dealt with, but okay, what I'm more concerned about is the Lord's church. And I will endure all of this stuff from verse 23 down to verse 27 or 28, whatever it is, because of my concern for the Lord's church. And that needs to be a minister. I can endure whatever because it's not about me. Right. And he says that all throughout this text in Acts 20. Paul's like, it's not about me. It's about the whole counsel of God. It's about protecting the Lord's church against these savage wolves. And when I can have a mentality that says, what can I do to make sure that I am fulfilling the ministry, that I'm furthering the gospel, and that I'm having a true concern for the Lord's church, then however long I stay in a place, I'll leave that up to the Lord, and just do the work.
Yeah. I think about in verse 33 when he says, I coveted no one's silver or gold or apparel, and how, of course, to Timothy he says, love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and it seems, he's equipping Timothy to deal with some of the stuff that was going on, interestingly enough, in Ephesus at that time. However, preachers need to hear that kind of thing too, and sometimes we get a little upset because maybe we don't have the benefits package that somebody in the secular world has, or maybe the number on our W-2 doesn't go as far as it would on somebody else's because we're having to fund our own 401 or Roth IRA, or in health insurance, whatever it is. This is, I guess this is kind of crass, but I'm sort of like suck it up, buttercup kind of thing, because if I don't want to get this reputation that it's all about the money for me, even among the elders, even if the congregation doesn't ever pick up on it, which I would say it would be difficult for them not to if that's how you feel.
Right.
But that was another aspect I think that must have, again, high level, the trust we're talking about. But here's a person, it's not just a preacher trying to leech, as much as he can out of a congregation for personal gain. At the end of the day, it's not really about him anyway.
No. And that's perfect. I mean, Paul wasn't going and preaching for what he was going to receive out of it, and often would say, I stole from other churches, I was taking support from other churches, not to have to get it from you, and for him to say here, wasn't about the money. And then the very next verses are the part about working hard, about, I labored, night and day, and with tears. And so that I made sure that it wasn't about me, that I took care of what I needed, but for the cause of Christ, to keep the attention off of me. And I think, to me, that's critical in any work.
We say that while at the same time realizing, okay, Paul's not married. Paul doesn't have a kid with some kind of difficulty that's causing a lot of doctor bills and that kind of thing. I mean,
that's true.
This is the same guy who said in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, hey, it's right to pay the preacher, and you should.
Yes.
And the guy who labors for the gospel ought to be supported by that.
Yes.
I just go back to the psalmist. I've been young and now I'm old, and I've never seen the righteous forsaken nor his descendants begging for bread. God has a way of taking care of those who are committed to Him. I don't think that's a prosperity gospel kind of thing to say. No. God takes care of His people.
He does.
Yeah,
He does. And you're right. We can read that and just make it out to be the best scenario, and just don't worry about it, stick it out. And you're right. Paul didn't have some of the things that maybe we have to think about and take care of. But there's also some things that he had going on that we will never have to, hopefully, never have to bear.
That's a good point. Like that big 2 Corinthians 11 list you were just mentioning.
Like that. Yeah. But in all cases, you're right. The Lord took care of Paul, and even in Acts 27 you were referencing earlier. I mean, he's in the middle of a storm. And what does he say? The Lord to whom I belong, and whom I serve. He's going to get us out of this.
Yeah.
And if I have that mentality that, okay, the Lord to whom I belong and to whom I serve, He's going to take care of me and of my family. And if I trust that to be true, then I'm going to throw myself into the work. I'm going to throw myself into the ministry of serving the Lord, and let my Lord fulfill what He's told me He's going to do.
Sometimes over the years, and I'm not like a Dear Diary kind of person, but
no?
I have. It's not surprising to you, but I will write down thoughts just to help myself untangle my thinking a little bit if I feel jumbled up or whatever. So I guess it's like a journal, but it's not. It's just a collection of thoughts that are really just for me, and it just helps me think through.
Good.
But I find myself giving the advice to myself. Unsolicited advice from yourself. That's a weird dynamic. But anyway, just keep your head down and do the work. Just keep your head down and do the work. And that's not a commentary on anything that's going on at Henderson or anywhere else I've been. But it's just sometimes I get distracted and I get this feeling of raging fires all around. I don't know what to do first, or how are we going to get out of this, or how am I supposed to help do my part to navigate us through this.
Right.
Just keep your head down and do the work. And it kind of sounds like that's what you're saying from the principles of Paul in Acts 20 and throughout his ministry. He just kept his head down and did the work, did what he was supposed to do, didn't get distracted, didn't let anything lure him away from Jesus. That's how he stuck it out, whether we're talking about Ephesus or anywhere else, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he even tells the elders, everywhere I go, I know that change and tribulations, and when I read that, I always look at the S on the end of the word tribulation. It wasn't just, tribulations
one
were
is
coming.
enough.
Yeah. He said, these things are coming. I know that they await me, but I still press on. And that's what you're saying. Put your head down and do the work. There's all of these other things that could distract me. And, the survey done and, seeing how long the guys are staying at various congregations, You know, what's happening too often is just guys getting out of the work completely. You know, and that's a different podcast for a different day.
Sure.
But it's because it is easy to get discouraged when you see all of these fires out here. What are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about this? And that can be challenging. But when I say, okay, Paul looks here and he says, all of these things await me, but I'm still pressing forward because there's a ministry I've got to fulfill, and the Lord is going to see me through this, one way or the other. The Lord's going to see me through this, and just, you know, regardless of what situation you're in, just putting your best foot forward in that service and saying, okay, you know, I don't want to be the cause for problems. I don't want to be the reason that things, you know, bad things happen. But I'm just going to do what I need to do in serving the Lord, you know. And even here, as he gets to the end, you know, it's almost like we might think it's kind of strange where he kind of tails off here, but he says, you know, I was determined that you know, he says that you must support the weak. I've shown you in every way by laboring like this that you must support the weak. And it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
How did he get over there? I mean, we've been talking. What do you mean support the weak? But you know, Jesus said in Matthew 25 that as much as you've done it unto the least of these my brethren, you've done it unto me. So I mean, sometimes we look at the big things that we can do, or the you know the higher visibility people that we can impact, and you know, it may be that there are those days where I just need to go and find those people that aren't as visible in the church, that are not the greatest in the kingdom, that are kind of off to the side, and say, okay, today I'm going to make a difference in that person's, whether it's ever known or anything, because that's part of my ministry.
Right. Yeah. All right. Just as we wrap up, I'm thinking about the fellow who's listening to this, and he's saying, "Oh, I would love a long ministry at one congregation. It just hadn't been how it's worked out for me." And I guess if you want to offer words of encouragement in a minute, I just want to say to this fellow, you know, hey, don't think we're beating up on you or that your ministry is any less of value because of whatever circumstances have prompted your circumstances. But to say, just to encourage all of us, right, that this is obviously a goal. There are guys who think about missionaries who may work in this part of this country for a while, and then they'll move to this part, and then maybe they'll do a cycle, almost like Paul's missionary travels. And hey, that's great. But to think about, okay, what the overarching point of this tenure conversation is, how can I be most effective and help people for their long haul to give their lives in faithful service to Jesus, right?
And I think that's the key. You know, if we're looking for, well, I've only been, you know, my longest time at a congregation has only been 2.5 years. It's been 3. Okay. But you had that time there to impact lives. Yeah. And maybe it's one life that you impact there for good, for eternity. You know, maybe it's one young person that you've made a difference in their life, and maybe that's going to cause them to be faithful for the rest of their lives. And maybe that you look back, okay, that's the only thing that I really did. Okay, well, you made an eternal difference in this person's life, or you touched, you know, you touched this person who was outside of Christ, and yet you kept going to that one coffee shop, and all of a sudden, you know, that person becomes a Christian. And so we look sometimes for the big splash, the big things, the long haul, and you know, it's just one little difference I can make at a time, and whether that's in a long duration at a congregation or whether it's short, to say, Lord, just use me wherever I am.
Yes.
Use me however you can. Right. Make me, you know, the terminology from Romans 6, make me an instrument of righteousness. I love that. To me, it's just very vivid. You know, I think of a surgeon who's got those instruments that he uses in the OR, you know, give me that. And I'm just one of those instruments in God's hands. Okay, God, wherever I am, whatever room you've got me in, just make me an instrument of righteousness to make a difference in whatever people's lives that I can touch. And if that helps me to stay here for a longer period of time, wonderful. But let God figure out, you know, it may be that God needs, you know, preachers to be spread out a little bit more in different places. You know, if the Lord if Daniel says, and he does, if Daniel's talking about the fact that, that God is the one who sets up kings and if he's doing that with nations out there, you think God's having any impact on his nation, on the church? Is it possible that he is helping congregations? We don't know about the providence of God and how that works, but just be an instrument in the hand of God. Be that instrument of righteousness. Get yourself ready for any opportunity that comes. And if the opportunity doesn't come, that's okay. You just continue to be that instrument wherever you are, making a difference, just one person at a time.
Paul said, by life or by death, not to minimize or demean what he said, but perhaps what he said after that should be our mantra as well. No matter what, Christ will be magnified in my body.
Right.
So everywhere, anytime, all the time.
There you go.
And that's challenging enough as it is.
That it is.
So we'll work on that.
That's the tenure that we've got to work on, right? The Christian lifelong tenure of faithful living. Yeah.
David Sproule at the Palm Beach Lakes Church of Christ, thank you for carving out some time during busy PTP week.
It's always fun,
sit
Robert.
Down with us.
You do a great job with this. Appreciate all the different ways that you're serving the church, man.
Wow, this is fun, but what you all at home don't really appreciate is all those questions at the beginning. That was totally off the cuff on your, and I'm sorry about that. But
no, that's fine.
Thanks. This is why I like doing this, because we sit down and we start talking about stuff, and I don't know. I love these kinds of conversations.
Well, because it's real. It's not scripted. There is no script anywhere up here.
I wish there were a teleprompter. That might make things a little better for us sometimes. For me. Hey, that's going to do it for this edition of Preachers in Training. I want to thank you for being a part of this today, and remind you that brand new episodes release every Thursday from thelightnetwork.tv, and our podcast partners. Hit follow or subscribe so that you never miss an episode. You can also watch video versions of these podcasts on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com, search for The Light Network or Preachers in Training, and you'll find us right there. Appreciate you making us a part of your week. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and let's go serve Jesus faithfully for the long haul and preach the word. See you then.